So one of the things that we want to think about is the distinction between teacher evaluation and teaching evaluation. And for me, it's always been teacher evaluation. I mean, that's what we've always called it. How many of you already call it teaching evaluation? So the difference is that then we're looking at the instruction, we're looking at the interaction, we're looking at the strategy and the strategic engagement, and not looking so much at the individual, although that's a factor, but it is not the whole point. And so for the purpose of today, I want us to focus on what would it mean if we developed a solid system of teaching evaluation, or the evaluation of teaching, as a means of support for implementing the Common Core. There are multiple sources that can be used in the evaluation of teaching, some of which are more common. We've used observation, but not always standards-based observation that is tied either to the standards for teaching, for what good teaching practice looks like, and or the standards for learning. In this case, the Common Core and other standards that are currently adopted by the state and by the district and by the school. Whatever the learnings are that we're striving for, are we actually looking at that in terms of what's being evaluated for teaching good teaching practice? So we can use observation. We can look at curriculum plans, assignments, and student work samples. I think it's really when we get to the point of student work that we can tell something. We could plan. The thinking process for planning, I think, is valuable, but it's the student work that's going to tell us a lot more about what's really happened there. And then what's the evidence that we have of practices over time that support student learning? What's actually happening in a classroom or classrooms across the school? And then what evidence do we have of student learning, that actually students have learned? There was an alternative in Linda Darling Hammond's book. At the end of the book, she includes some appendices and some examples. And one of the examples that she includes in that book is the example of a protocol used to ask teachers to document the learning of one student. Sometimes there are 2 or 3. But to document the learning of a student over the course of the year. And to me, that could be such a fascinating process, so worthwhile to go through, to be able to then share those with other teachers and to have a conversation about the actual growth of one student's work over time as a representation of my teaching practice. So an example that I share with you. So of these 4, if you talk at your table, which of these 4 are currently actively part of your evaluation of teaching, of the system that you use for that, and which are not, but should be or could be in some way? So of the 4 types, standards-based observation, are you focused on standards? The examination of plans, assignments, and work samples, where are you with that, and so forth. So of those 4, what have you got in place now? Go. And what would you want to have if you're missing some? Or what would you not, I guess? Okay? All right, so one way to think about this is sort of what are the data sources that we want to use? And then the other is what are the approaches or the tools that we might use? What are the measures that we might use for teacher evaluation? And 4 of them that I'd like to have you have an opportunity to talk about a little bit are observation protocols. Second is using student surveys. How do we get the student voice? It was really interesting to me when I moved from being a public school teacher and then curriculum director to being a college professor, because in higher ed, in both of the colleges where I worked, a student survey was a critical piece of the the way that we got feedback, and was part of what we had to reflect on in terms of our annual review each year. So how do we get the student voice in there? Value-added models that look at student growth and have measures to look at that, some of them effectively and some less so. And then teacher performance assessments, an actual separate assessment of teacher performance of some kind.